all, I am Lilah, and I chose to do my presentation on my favorite constellations. I'm a really big outdoorsy person. I love to go camping, and one of my favorite things to do whenever there's little light pollution is to get a chance to look up at the night sky and try to find all the constellations I can. I also went through a pretty significant Greek mythology phase when I was a kid, so I've just always really been into the different stories about the different gods and nymphs and creatures and all of that. All right, starting with a pretty common one is Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, better known as the Big and Little Dipper. The Little Dipper is Ursa Minor, and then the Big Dipper makes up the tail of Ursa Major. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to view all of Ursa Major now, especially when there's a lot of light pollution. Polaris, or the North Star, also makes up the end of Ursa Minor, so a lot of people use the Big Dipper to point them into the direction of the North Star. All right, the mythology behind this is that Ursa Major and Ursa Minor were originally both nymphs, Castillo and her son Arcas. Now, Zeus took a liking to Castillo. This made Zeus's wife Hera very jealous, and in retaliation, she turned them both into bears. Now, to save them from Hera's wrath, Zeus flung them into the night sky where they would be safe, unfortunately stretching out their tails in the process. So that's why they have these weird long tails that bears usually don't have. All right, next up is Hercules. This is also a pretty common name. A lot of people know Hercules. He is a Greek hero. His story goes that he was given 12 labors by the king Eurystheus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, to prove himself. Now, some of these included slaying the Nemean lion and stealing Hera's golden apples from her garden of Hesperides. So in his constellation, he's in a kneeling position. He's held holding that bat with the lion's mane on his back and holding in an outstretched hand those golden apples that he stole. The next constellation is Draco. Anybody familiar with the Harry Potter series knows Draco Malfoy, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin. J.K. Rowling just used a lot of Greek and Latin names and meanings to name her characters. So Draco in Greek is dragon. There's a lot of different myths associated with this constellation. The most common one, or at least the one I know, is that he's associated with the dragon Ladon, who guarded the garden of Hesperides. So one of Hercules' labors was to steal those golden apples, and before he did that, he had to slay the guard of that garden. Yeah. All right, the next one is my favorite constellation of all time. I couldn't really tell you why. I think it's just because he's a little guy. He's the smallest constellation in this bunch, but it is Delphinus. If you couldn't already guess, Delphinus is a dolphin. The story behind this one goes that Delphinus saved the famous Greek poet and musician Arion, who was captured by pirates and thrown overboard. Delphinus carried him back to land on his back, and the sea god Poseidon was so thankful that he gave Delphinus an eternal spot in the heavens. All right, last but certainly not least is Cassiopeia. This is another one that I'm always telling people is super easy to find. Other than the Big and Little Dipper, I'd say it's the easiest one I know, is Cassiopeia. Once you know that W shape, it's pretty easy to spot in the night sky. The story behind Cassiopeia goes that this was a vain queen. She boasted to all of the land and all of the gods that she was more beautiful than anyone else. This greatly, greatly angered the sea god Poseidon, and as her punishment, he sentenced her to eternity, chained to a throne in the sky. So her constellation is depicted sitting down. She usually has her hand stretched out. Sometimes it's shown her playing with her hair, and then she's either holding a feather or oftentimes a mirror to symbolize her vanity. All right, if you know any other constellations, I would love to hear about it. Always looking to add to that mental dictionary, show off some more stars to people. If not, that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.